Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, Tackling Developer Security Training, brought to you by Veracode and AWS. We have an awesome webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping items with you as usual. First, please remember that this event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We will send you an email later with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand, or you can always visit us at devops.com/webinars. It will be there for you too. Also, please feel free to use the Q&A tab on your console to submit questions at any time during the presentation. We'll try and get through as many as possible, and if not, we can round those up, send them off to our presenters today, and they'll be able to follow up with you afterward. Finally, stick around till the end. We are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, and you stick around, you can find out if you are a winner. So today, we're going to have a little bit of a different experience for you today. We're going to start off with our awesome presenters, Mark Kriaf and Ray Bango, and they're going to walk you through some slides, kind of setting up the discussion, and then we're going to move into a really fun fireside chat where we're going to discuss anything and everything related to this topic, tackling developer security training. So it's going to be really fun. I've been really looking forward to this one. And for now, I'm going to turn my camera and my mic off and let these two tee it up. And then I will see you again in a few minutes when we really dig into the issue. So Ray and Mark, take it away. I'll see you in a few.
Thanks, Sharon. I appreciate the intro. Mark, thanks for being here with me. Mark's my partner in crime on this webinar, and so we'll have some good discussions going on in a little bit. I think what we wanted to do was tee it off first with a slide, kind of talking about the subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is helping software developers level up a little bit more on security and secure coding principles. And it's a pleasure to be here and discuss this. So I'm a senior director of developer and security relations for Veracode. I help developers better understand how to do software security and secure coding. And so hopefully this presentation, this webinar, will help tackle some of the things that we've seen in the industry, some of the techniques that we've kind of embraced to help folks level up a little bit when it comes to building more resilient software. So if you really think about it, software is in everything we use. Looks like somebody's touching my keys again. Mark, that must have been you. I think Mark's trolling me. He's messing with me right now. Yeah.
I'm messing with you.
Yeah. So, software is in everything we use. We take it for granted. I think, you surf the web. Well, that's software. You pick up your mobile phone. Well, that's software. That's, that's firmware that's running your device. It's even in things like ship navigation systems and the systems that help pilots kind of navigate the skies. So software is in everything. And at the heart of that is developers. And when we think about developers, at least the way I think about it, it's a very diverse group of folks with different needs, different goals. But ultimately, the main thing that they all want to do is build really compelling systems. And so I like to break them up into these very simple buckets, because I think it's important to kind of identify what their focus is. And so you have enterprise developers who want to build very sustainable systems across the board. They're very conservative in the way they embrace technology. And that makes a lot of sense because business continuity is super important to a lot of the companies where the enterprise developers live. Then you have the breadth developers, and they're more risk takers. I'd like to think of them as the startup culture, the folks who just want to put stuff out there and see if it sticks. And they're great. I worked as both an enterprise developer and as a breadth developer, and both of them are super fun and both have their own set of challenges. And I've also been fortunate to work as an open source developer because I was part of the jQuery project many years ago. And the open source developers, what I love about this community is that they're willing to create stuff and then offer it up, in many cases for free, just because they want to help solve complex problems and they want people to contribute to that and build projects that help to create really compelling solutions. So you have a very diverse set of developer mentalities, developer goals, but all of them ultimately want to create amazing experiences. And then you have security folks. And so what do security folks think developers do. I'm going to say this is my opinion, but I've brought this up many times, and invariably many developers have agreed with me on this, and they think that we're just kind of sunning ourselves. We have a butler bringing us drinks, and we're just kind of chilling by the beach all day long. And so, it's far from the truth. I mean, I live in South Florida, and I can tell you that I'm not Joe Jonas living the high life there. You have to build code, and building code takes a lot of mental power, a lot of focus, and you have to sit in front of a computer for long periods of time. In fact, my family often asks me, how do you do that? How do you sit in front of a computer for so long? And so, Mark, I'm sure you've experienced that too, and people probably ask that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so what do developers think of security folks? And well, of course, what do they think? They think that the security folks are the ones that they want to ruin the fun. They want to be yelling and saying, you cannot do this. You cannot install that piece of software. You're going to compromise the network. And I've been very fortunate in my career to have transitioned over from software development into security. And I can tell you that most of the security folks I've met are not like this. I'm not saying all of them. Most of them are not like this. They want to help to keep the business running, and that's a very important role. They definitely want to do that, but they also want to enable folks to be successful, and it's a hard balance to strike. And so I empathize with the security folks because they do have a challenge. And so, ultimately, developers are builders. They want to create stuff, and that means that there's a lot of things that they have to embrace. And as modern development stacks continue to evolve, there's going to be a lot of changes and a lot of complexity. And so let me tell you a secret about software development. It's really, really hard. All right. If you look at the stacks that are out there, and hopefully the folks in the audience can kind of relate to this, there's a lot of complexity. When you're a software developer nowadays, you're leveraging any number of the 25 plus languages out there. Yeah, COBOL's there, and COBOL's still used. I live in Florida, and I can attest to the state of Florida's unemployment system not being able to scale because they didn't have COBOL developers to support them. So yes, COBOL's still there. And of course, you have a ton of frameworks that developers use to make their development substantially easier. And we can't put aside the integrations, whether it's your APIs that you're embracing, cloud infrastructure you're taking advantage of, or CI/CD build in systems that make your life easier in terms of integrating new tools or constantly deploying out your software. So there's a lot of different touch points that affect developers. So you can imagine that this becomes really hard for developers to manage. And when security comes into play, it's probably not at the forefront of their minds. And so this is what development kind of looks like nowadays. And this is an older picture because I could tell by the stickers on there. There's HTML5, CSS3, PHP, and Node.js. And I remember those days. Those were the good old days to me because that wasn't complexity. This is poor developer is clearly was looking at the future and saying, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Because the future now, what we're dealing with is way more complex than just 3 or 4 different technologies that have to be implemented. You have a ton of frameworks that are complex in themselves that in many cases are their own language to learn. And you start taking into consideration the DevOps motions where now infrastructure as code is such a critical aspect of that. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to building and deploying resilient systems. And so developers in many cases view security as an IT problem. This is a pervasive notion. I've grown up with that. I still see this daily. I still talk with developers who have kind of told me this. Mark, you and I were chatting about this yesterday, and you kind of shook your head. You said, "Yeah, this is how developers think."
Yeah, it's a recurring theme from customers I work with, and also from partners. They want to offload security. It's not their problem. It's not their issue. That's what they used to. 20 years ago, security was mainly an IT problem, as you said. It was something that you did, when you designed your infrastructure, when you designed your architecture, and that's it. You were not considering, my application is an entry point to my network now.
Exactly. And so that's one of the challenges that I think developers need to think about. They need to kind of get into this mindset. And I like to consider it a growth mindset. I love that phrase because it's getting out of your comfort zone and looking at problems differently. and not thinking that that problem is somebody else's issue. It's something that maybe I can bring value to it. And not thinking so much that security adds more work, because, you know, we know security is hard, but in reality, it should be everybody's concern. I think everybody needs to think about security, and whether you're an IT administrator, whether you're part of the DevOps team, whether you're a software developer or a security professional, everybody needs to be thinking about security and how it plays a part in their day-to-day lives. And so we were, you know, there was a survey done by ESG a while back, and it said 35% of respondents reported that less than half of their development teams are participating in formal security training. That's a scary number. That's really, dare I say, disturbing, because that means that you have a lot of developers out there that are not taking security as a priority. It's not a first-class citizen during their development cycle. Then you couple that with the fact that in educational institutions, you're not getting formalized secure coding training. You're not getting security training, period. There was a stat that came out that only 3% of US bachelor's degree graduates have cybersecurity related skills. And I'm not surprised by that. I was speaking to a professor out of Tufts University. His name is Ming Chao, and he's a computer science professor there and one of the biggest advocates for bringing cybersecurity skills into curriculum. And he talks about the fact that very few universities, very few educational institutions have any type of formal cybersecurity program or skills training, period. And so when you're talking about computer science, that's the area that most people sign up for when they want to become software developers or engineers. And if they're not being taught proper secure coding principles, that affects so many different touch points in the software development lifecycle. So that's something that needs to be changed. And then in Vericode's State of the Software Security Report that we published in 2020, we found that 76% of apps have at least one security flaw. Okay, all right, I can deal with that, because, you know, ultimately we're human. Software developers are going to make mistakes, and, you know, look, security issues are bugs. That's what they are. Ultimately, that's what they are. And so we're going to make mistakes. But the concerning part is that half of the security findings are still open 6 months after discovery, and that is an issue that comes into play with, obviously, prioritization, your threat model, business continuity, business demands, things like that. And so all these things have to be considered when you're taking into account how security plays a part in your software development lifecycle. And so it becomes even more important as recent news, and this is recent news. Now, remember, we had dependency confusion back in February, and that affected large-scale package managers from the likes of Apple and Microsoft and other ones. We had PyPy, you know, basically had a malicious package put in there that was downloaded over 30,000 times. And you know, a good friend of mine, Adam Baldwin, he's been harping about the NPM package manager apocalypse. That's what he liked to call it. And he was saying for many years that sooner or later somebody's going to drop a malicious package in NPM, and it's going to affect a lot of people. And that's been happening more and more. So what he was foretelling was that actually is coming to light now. And malicious actors are seeing that this is an avenue that they can take advantage of in order to compromise systems and take advantage of user data. And remember that compromising user data is more than just saying, oh, we lost some data and that's it. There are big financial implications for the consumer who loses their data, whether it's identity theft or loss of finances, but also to the company in terms of compliance issues like GDPR. So these things are important to consider. And when you're thinking about security training and making sure that your developers are up to speed on the most up-to-date patterns for creating secure software, keep these things in mind. Keep these things in mind that supply chain attacks are prevalent. They need to be considered, that code can cause compromises that have substantial financial impact. That's one thing I want to drive home.
Yeah, and it's not only open source projects. It's not only NPM or PyPy. It's, as we saw in the SolarWinds situation, this was an attack that was targeted towards a closed source enterprise-grade software. And it used the same, very similar methods, essentially swapping some packages underneath everything in order to get access. And that's very scary when we think about it. When we think about that, it's not only open source project. It's not only projects that have, well, let's say, more relaxed security protocols, but it's also closed source, and applications that enterprise grade applications per se.
Agreed, Mark. And you look at SolarWinds, you look at Kaseya, and the impact on managed service providers are going to be, that's huge, because now it's basically a downstream trickle effect that comes down and says, all right, let me expand it out, and you have this tremendous threat attack surface that opens up simply because one package was replaced, and now it gets trickled down to many different service providers and many different clients. So it's definitely an issue, and it's all software based. That's the thing. This is not a network infrastructure attack. This is a software issue that's being trickled down all the way to thousands of clients. And we look at the OWASP Top 10 and OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, which has been around for, I think they're celebrating 20 years now, 25 years, something like that. And so they publish every year a top 10 report of things that are pervasive security issues in software and application security. And so the fact that cross-site scripting, cross-site scripting attacks, I can't say that, I'm tongue-tied today, are still pervasive, and things like SQL injections and XML, external entity attacks, where you embed malicious code into XML packages and stuff like that. These things have had solutions for years. And because these solutions aren't being socialized within the developer communities, I think that's one of the reasons that we're still seeing them be so pervasive. And it's sad to see things like SQL injections being so pervasive. That to me is something that I feel like it's been solved for decades now, or at least a decade, and we're not getting that message across, and these issues continue to exist. And so that's kind of disconcerting. And so, part of this is because, again, many graduates that are coming into the workplace are ill-prepared. It is what it is. The threat landscape is shifting very rapidly. We have new frameworks, we have new tool chains, all these things come in, and every time we introduce something new, there's a new opportunity for a threat actor to capitalize on that. And of course, we don't have curriculums in place that help to teach students, how do you tackle, what's a secure coding pattern? What does that even look like? How do you do threat modeling, let alone how do you write secure software? And the other thing that I've seen on a regular basis is lack of employer investment. And this is the one that's concerning to me, because once you get into the workplace, it's hard enough to do your own job. You have a job to do, you have a responsibility, you have deliverables, but then you're also being asked to learn something that's not being provided to you. You're not getting security training. You're not getting the tools you need to help you be successful when it comes to security itself. And that's hard. I see so many development teams that don't have secure coding plans or secure coding handbooks, that at the very least, a new employee can come in and say, let me understand what are some of the patterns that they have implemented to make sure that when I write a piece of code, it's something that won't get the company compromised. And the other part is, believe it or not, it feels like sometimes there's a lack of incentive to make security a priority, because business deliverables matter so much that they just want to get out. They need to get the money in. They need to get the product out. They need to be ship. And the priority is deliverables. And when you have that and you're putting this much pressure on software individuals, they're going to go for the low-hanging fruit. They're going to get that code out. They're going to try to do their best to make it work. And fingers crossed that it doesn't, cause a compromise. So the other part is that, look, as the cloud has really kind of taken over everything. And I know Mark is grinning because it's near and dear to your heart, Mark. And everybody is transitioning to the cloud. I mean, it's whether you're a large-scale enterprise or an SMB, the cloud is making things substantially easier, especially from an infrastructure perspective. If you implement a strong and well-documented and well-implemented cloud solution, you're going to have something that is way more resilient to attacks than if you are trying to manage things on your own. It's just, I'd rather have Amazon managing my cloud and knowing that I can click on a button and everything just gets magically updated, because I feel they have an understanding of that infrastructure really well. And as long as I have a good cloud solution architect there to help me kind of go down the path and make sure I'm pressing the right buttons, I'm going to have a really good infrastructure and one that scales and one that's really cost effective. That makes total sense. So I understand why people are going to the cloud. Threat actors also understand that cloud infrastructures are going to be inherently more resistant to attacks. If you look, you see a lot of companies that do pen testing against the cloud, but it's not like they're finding the same level of issues that you would find when you were hosting 10, 20, 50, 100, I don't know, Intel boxes sitting in a data center running whatever operating system you want, because you had to manage all that. You had to keep that going. This cloud infrastructure is way more resilient. So what's happening is threat actors are kind of changing their perspective and their lens, and they're saying, let's attack the application side of things now. And that's where they're finding more of the vulnerabilities. And if you've ever looked at bug bounty reports, I can tell you that bug bounty hunters are really, really smart folks. They're incredibly creative in terms of how they find vulnerabilities. And so if they're finding this and they're doing it from an ethical hacking perspective, imagine the malicious hacker. Imagine what they're trying to do in order to get your data. And so, with all these challenges that we have, there's obviously opportunities because, sure, we have lack of secure coding education, but there is a plethora of tools out there that can help you level up your staff in secure coding principles. And so, of course, you're going to have some of them that are a little bit more expensive. You're going to have like SANS education, which, SANS runs pretty pricey. They're in the thousands of dollars, but they have great courseware. You have OWASP. OWASP has a tremendous breadth of information on their websites that talks about how you write secure code. And they also have tools that show you how an attacker would think about your vulnerable application. There are projects specifically made to allow your development teams to attack them and get into the attacker mindset so they understand what an attacker might do on a specific type of compromise. From my experience, when I've shown that to developers, I felt like they're like, oh, I get that now. Now I understand why sanitizing this input makes sense. Now I understand why whitelisting certain type of commands makes sense. I understand why I need to ensure that I don't allow user input into, APIs, things like that. So these are things that are really important and they're available to you. So I would urge you to look at things like SANS, SANS, look at OWASP. Veracode has something called Security Labs, which helps developers, and we're going to kind of talk about that in a little bit, but it'll help developers get up to speed on common secure coding principles. The second challenge is, of course, deliverables and expectations, and that the fact that you have a lot of business leaders that are just putting so much pressure on developers to get things done at the expense of security. And that's something that is more of a top-down kind of conversation. I think you need to level set with the leadership teams and start figuring out where does security sit as a priority in your organization? And what are the business impact of being compromised? If you haven't gone through a complete, threat modeling or impact analysis of what would happen if you got compromised, I think that's something that you need to take a step back and look at, because that's going to help you determine where you prioritize your security. Look, security could be something that you're just going to say, I'm going to handle it at the edge and I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be a network perimeter thing. A lot of companies do that. But if you're putting anything out on the internet, that is a target. Any application you put on the internet is a target. Anything that I can touch, I have a possibility of hacking. And I'm just, I've been trained in hacking. If I can touch your app, there's a definite possibility that I can go ahead and mess with things. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to be able to do it, and I'm not going to be searching for you. Don't worry about it. But, I can do it, and there are a lot of people better than me, so that's kind of scary. Now, of course, you have technical debt, and I like to call it the insecurity of technical debt, because once developers push out their code, nobody wants to touch it. I don't know about you, Mark, but I have a lot of code out there that I've pushed. I don't want to look at it again. I don't want people to look at it again. Thankfully, it was, it's probably been replaced by now, thankfully, but,
yeah. And it's not only that. I think if we're talking about technical debt, a lot of us here, whether we're writing code or whether we're writing CloudFormation templates, Terraform code, we Google essentially. We look for things online, and sometimes we're very tired. We're very we have, as you said, we're under pressure to deliver. we're copying and pasting code, and we're not aware of what exactly we're copying and pasting, or why we're copying and pasting specific packages, specific calls. So this is also something that we need to take care of, and we need to make sure that we are aware of when we are talking about technical debt or talking about our older applications, older code. Yeah.
Yep, I've had conversations with CISOs, and they're like, well, what do I do with this legacy system that I have that, is 10, 15 years old, and, doesn't get software updates, and it's running on, like, I don't know, Windows XP, but it's critical to the manufacturing process. And so how do you manage that? And so I think part of that is understanding what your threat model is and understanding where the attack points could be, and then isolating some of that code if possible. If it's code that's out in the public, I think there has to be a concerted effort to continue to maintain it. You can't just say, all right, this code is up on X website, and I'm going to throw my hands up and say, whatever happens, happens. Because not only can it affect your business, but it can affect your customers, and it can affect so many other things within the industry. We don't want to just kind of throw our hands up and say, I don't want to ever touch this code again because it's 5-10 years old and it's not the cool, shiny technology that I'm using now. And so there has to be policies in place to talk about how do we continue to maintain technical debt that is mission critical to the company. And do we need to isolate that code? Do we need to have people who are specially trained on that to do it? Have we done the proper threat modeling? Have we looked at the attack surface to ensure what's going on with it, and what are the ingress vectors? Those are things that have to be considered when you're talking about technical debt. And part of this could be also that you need to consider security champions within your organization. One of the things that I like to say is that not every developer is going to be a security expert, and they shouldn't be. So, software developers didn't sign up to be security experts. They signed up to be these builders, and they want to build really cool experiences. They want to build great UIs, and they want to delight users, and they want somebody to click on that button, buy that thing on that shopping cart, or they want to, I don't know, do this whiz bang thing that is kind of cool. Security is hard, but there are people who kind of gravitate to that, and I can actually point to myself. I was a software developer for 28 years, and I decided that I wanted to move into security. And so I've been very fortunate where now I'm getting a different perspective, and I have a different lens on what software development means, but not everybody's like me. And so having security champions and giving them the opportunity to kind of nurture that what's that word for it? That intrigue, or that curiosity. There you go. That curiosity for security is such an important thing. It's like they know the code. In some cases, they know the infrastructure. They know how it's being deployed. And now they can actually look at the code and say, wow, I understand where the threats could be in this particular code. And they can help communicate some of these changes in the code to their peers. And that's one of the things that a lot of folks like to advocate for, is the use of security champions who are also very good developers and that have that keen interest. But it doesn't mean that you have to make an investment in them. You have to make an investment in leveling them up, giving them the right training, giving them the right tools, and then also giving them the right authority to make decisions that affect code bases when it comes to security.
Right. And I think in our day and age today, when we see this shift towards cloud computing, we have an excellent opportunity here for people to grow their career. There are options for people that were not here 5 or 6 years ago or 10 years ago, just because there is a lack of people. There's a lack of DevOps people. There is a lack of security experts when we talk about from a developer perspective. So this is a great time for everybody to look into other fields that are interesting them, that can get them a new skill, maybe a new career path that you haven't thought about.
Absolutely, and any organization worth their chops is thinking about career development for their folks. If you have a good an HR organization, if you have good managers, those managers and HR folks are constantly thinking, how can we make the people that work at this company more successful? How can we continue to push their careers forward? And this is, like Mark said, there's opportunity across the board, especially in the security field, to do just that. Now, one thing is that, of course, there's this perception of additional work. I'm a big advocate of this right here, okay? And I think some developers might kind of, they might challenge me on this, but I do think the security should be part of the normal QA cycle, because when you see a security issue, well, what's a security issue? It's generally a bug. It's a software bug. I've never met any developer who purposely wanted to create a software bug. Now, Mark, yesterday you and I were talking. We're like, you gave me this look like, I don't know about that. There might be.
There might be some people, they're always the bad apples anywhere.
Thankfully, I haven't met them yet. I haven't experienced the bad apples yet. But to me, I think that security issues are just software bugs, and they should be treated as part of the normal QA cycle. And if software developers were able to kind of embrace this mentality, then security just becomes part of the DNA of the developer workflow. It's not part of the DNA right now. It's just not. There are some organizations where that has certainly changed. I think DevSecOps has helped to kind of promote that. A lot of people talk about shift left, where you're thinking about the whole entire security posture from the beginning of a project forward, or from the beginning of a new sprint, or from the beginning of a new feature. And that's all great. A lot of organizations have embraced that. A lot of them haven't. And the ones that haven't, security is not part of their DNA. If it becomes part of their DNA, especially from a development perspective, that's where you're going to start thinking about, that's where you're going to start seeing the results of building more secure software. And so the other part is also bringing developers into the decision-making process when it comes to security tools. And I like this picture because it kind of shows an analogy of a parent-child relationship. And so you have this child and sees all these different options, and those options, those ice creams, are security tools. And the child who, probably thinks, I love that one, and maybe it's the chocolate one. And, I see that as a developer. The developer might be sitting there looking at individual tools and saying, I like that tool because it solves my problems and it doesn't cause a lot of frictions. But then you have the parent standing in the back, and the parent's the ultimate decision maker. And typically the parent's going to be a C-level, it's going to be an IT person, it might be an AppSec person. And those persons have their own rationale for making the purchasing decisions. And so in many cases, the developer is left out of that, and the decision is made for them. If you don't allow a developer to be part of the decision-making process, they're less likely to be vested in that tool that you just bought. It's like anything. When you buy something, you're vested in it because you've just said, I want this. I want to be part of this. Developers want to be vested in what they're using. And when you are adding something into an overly complex development workflow, something that possibly could add more time to their builds, could break the builds, could cause more delays, they want to have a say in it. And in addition, they also have the best insight into how their applications work. You can't just choose tooling arbitrarily and say, I'm just going to choose a tool and that's it. And whatever. You have to let people help you make the right decision for the development stack that you're using and the infrastructure you're using. And developers in this case are really good in the development stack. So the one thing I always I love saying is that it's true. Automation is a developer's best friend. Most developers want to automate the heck out of everything. And so I understand it. If they can just say, type in a command and boom, everything just magically happens, beautiful. If they can type, a commit, they can do a commit, and all of a sudden, all the, Willy Wonka whiz bang things happen in the background on their CI/CD pipeline, and magically everything gets deployed. Beautiful. That's what development is all about nowadays. And I get it. And that's where cloud infrastructure has really made things so easy. And this is why I'm a big advocate of it. And so you want to make sure that security is part of that whole entire pipeline. It's like you want it from the very beginning. You want tools that can integrate into your IDE. You want tools that can be part of your CI pipeline, and you want tools that can be part of your CD pipeline. That's where things like static analysis tools and software composition analysis tools come in. The SCAs will help to solve some of the issues that relate to supply chain attacks, for example, especially when you're talking about open source packages that you're ingesting. So when you're thinking about tool chains, make sure that they can integrate into all facets of your development workflow, because that's going to help to automate some of the security things that developers are going to be experiencing. But the other part that to consider is that you want to make sure that whatever tools you get offer real-world remediation advice to developers. Remember, developers are not security experts. If you just show something, this is a cross-site scripting attack, but you don't explain what that means or how to fix it, a developer's going to look at it and say, well, what am I supposed to do with this? They're not security experts. And again, I go back to this, not everybody should be a security expert. So make sure you get tools that actually help developers understand what the issue is and how to solve it to make their life easier. Otherwise, you will get pushback from folks. Guaranteed, we've seen this. You will have people who say, I don't know how to solve this, and why should I take advantage of that?
Yeah, and it's exactly this is I think a part of the whole DevOps change or mindset that we're experiencing right now. So as you said, this kind of information was siloed in early days. So when you had a security issue, you saw the name of the security issue, you didn't really know what was going on. You went to the security team. They told you, okay, we'll take care of that. And was the switch, or was this migration towards a more DevOps-oriented work, a way of working? A development team needs to have all these tools or all this knowledge together. And a very good way to do it is, again, making this information accessible to everybody, making this making the knowledge more essentially more widespread.
Yep, absolutely. So make sure that whatever you choose helps to empower developers to innovate in the most secure and frictionless way possible. The friction is a developer's enemy. So whatever you choose, make sure it makes their life smooth. And then the other thing I'm a big advocate is learning by doing. I talked about this earlier. There are tools out there that can show developers how security vulnerabilities can affect their applications. OWASP, Juice Shop is a great example of this. It's a modern application. It's based on Angular, Node.js, and some other tool chains that are really great in identifying what certain typical vulnerabilities might be and how to resolve them. And this is something that's freely available. And then also, Veracode has Security Labs Enterprise, which allows enterprises to teach their security teams proper secure coding principles, and it just kind of does it in a walkthrough type of scenario. There's labs, you can do competitions. It's a really good opportunity for development teams to level up in a self-paced type of fashion. And so I put a bit.ly link in there for anybody who might want to take a look at that and register for the free trial. It's an opportunity for other folks to just see what the possibilities are in terms of learning secure coding principles. So with that, we're going to kind of go into our fireside chat. Mark and I have been kind of going back and forth and talking a little bit about different topics, and we know that there's questions that want to be answered, and so we're going to pass this over to Sharon, and Sharon's going to help moderate this for us.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Great start, and a lot of awesome points brought up. So I'm going to go through a couple questions that came in from the audience first, and then we'll see what else comes in while we're talking, and if there's anything more general we can cover. So first off, Nivi wants to know, their organization is moving to the cloud, and it seems there's the perception that we don't need to do security anymore, particularly with regards to pen testing and DAST scanning. So they heard you say that with cloud, there's a more resilient, secure infrastructure, but not necessarily a safer or vulnerability-free application. So can you expand a little bit more on that and what's going on there?
Yeah.
So you want to take this one, Mark?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'll give it to you afterwards. And I think one of the most important things that we at AWS want to convey to customers is the shared responsibility model. The shared responsibility model, and it doesn't matter. Frankly, it doesn't matter. It's in cloud for cloud in general. So the infrastructure part, making sure that the hardware is secured from a physical perspective, is a responsibility of the cloud provider. In our case, AWS. So the AWS locations are secret, and there is no physical access, and there is an abstraction between where you actually run and what you actually see in the UI. And this is something that the AWS part is taken care of. But when we talk about shared responsibility model, there is a responsibility on the customer side to make sure that their information is secured. So whether it's encryption at rest, whether it's making sure that security groups are not, star allow access everything, and leveraging tools like Security Hub, like Code Guru, to make sure your code and network is secured, not only from the physical perspective, but also from a different layer. This is a very, very important part of any enterprise that is trying to do this migration toward cloud computing. And I agree with the perspective that Nivi said. There's a false perspective that when we move to the cloud, it's not our problem anymore. Security is not our problem; it's somebody else's problem. And I've seen that in a lot of customers that I work with. But it's important doesn't matter which cloud provider that you work with, to realize that there is a shared part here.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And so the perception that the cloud is a silver bullet it's not. I mean, what it's doing is it's helping you provide greater security, greater scalability, increased functionality. You're going to have less human resources necessary to scale out your infrastructure. It's not to say that humans aren't a part of it, because there are people who are squarely focused on managing cloud infrastructure. And these are diehard professionals who need to understand a lot of different moving parts. But remember one thing, that when you put your application out on the internet anywhere, you're now allowing third parties, folks that are beyond your control, to have access to your assets in some fashion. You can only do so much to protect it. And invariably, if you have somebody who is a really determined threat actor, they're going to get into your system. That's always been a common phrase. You talk to any security person, and anybody who tells you that no threat actor can ever get into your system, I don't. They're lying. I'm going to say it. They're just lying. All right, because I have seen so many things that you'd be amazed by how smart threat actors can be. Now, with that said, just remember that your application could have a lot of different moving parts itself. You could have typical forms that just accept user input. I've seen that. You could have APIs that you need to authenticate against and then accept user input. Are you doing everything possible to protect those systems and make sure that they are resilient, that you've taken the proper secure coding principles and applied it to your application to protect against that? Are you doing things like encrypting data at rest? That's something that seems like a very common principle that people should be embracing. And so many times we've seen breaches where data is not encrypted, and that breach data gets put on the dark web. And that's where things like compliance comes in. That's where GDPR fines come in. The ransomware attacks you're seeing nowadays, if you look at it, what they're threatening is pay us, or we're going to release all this customer information out in the public in the hopes that you get fined. That's the threat. It's not so much saying, hey, we'll unlock the data for you. No, it's a threat of public accessibility of private, confidential information, including customer information. So we can't say that the cloud, going to the cloud, absolves you as a customer of taking consideration or making security a prime consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this one's for you, Ray. What would you suggest, or how did you switch your focus from being a developer toward a security champion?
So what happened with me is that I was focused squarely on web development. That's kind of where I wanted to be. I really loved web development. I had been doing it for since 2000, so I had been doing it a very long time. And I noticed that application security wasn't something anybody really was talking about. And so I kind of dove into it. I said, all right, I wonder what this actually looks like. And the deeper I got into it and the more I started talking to security professionals, and the more that I actually started going to events related to security, the greater the passion I got for security. It kind of reinvigorated me. Now, mind you, I'm dating myself a little bit because I started coding in 1989. So yes, I'm a little bit, and maybe a lot of bit older than many of the folks here. But I remember when I started coding that I would stay up till all hours of the night because the thought of writing a line of code and having it do something was so amazing to me. And that's kind of how I felt with security. I got excited about it. I got excited about the possibility of learning these new facets. Now, security is very large, by the way. Don't think security is only like protecting systems. There's obviously defensive aspects of it, and within defensive aspects, there are multiple tiers, including incident response and digital forensics and open source intelligence and all the threat analysis and threat hunting and all these different things. And then, of course, you have the offensive side, and there's so many angles to it. I wanted to explore. It was a complete career change for me, and I like application security and I like offensive security. I like having the attacker mindset. It's fun doing that, but it's also gives me a different understanding of how my software, how the code that I write can impact a business, and that's the critical thing. I like being able to sit down with developers and say, look, this is something that could be a really big issue if you don't take into consideration. Or analyzing code and saying, oh wow, this eval code here, yeah, this eval on this API could really wreak havoc if I could just drop in a bash shell in here, and all of a sudden I get a reverse shell back to my computer. And so those are things that I think are important for anybody who wants to get into security to consider.
Yeah. Let's see. So I had a question that I've been thinking about regarding shift left. So everyone's talking lately about shift left, and the responsibility for security should be constantly moving left to developers. But at some point, is that part of the problem with developers and security today, that there is so much on developers' plates that, like you were mentioning before, that it just becomes what to prioritize, and then the priority becomes shipping. When can you shift too much left? Is that a thing? How do you handle that? Am I completely off base? I could be.
No, I don't think so. Mark, you want to jump in on this one, or?
I'll let you start.
Okay, so in terms of shift left, ultimately it's just a different mindset. It's trying to think about security from and threat modeling from the beginning of a specific function. And if you're able to do it from the beginning of a project, that's great. That's awesome. It doesn't mean that developers have to control the whole entire process. Remember that in a project, you have a lot of different aspects. You have infrastructure. You have infrastructure as code. You have cloud deployment. You have CI/CD. You have frameworks, tools, all these different things. And so it doesn't mean that developers are the ones that end up being solely responsible for security. It just means that when you're going to start planning for something, that security should be a part of that process. That's the main premise of it at a very high level. Without going into deep details, you have to start thinking about where security fits within the conversation and the flow of a project as a whole. And I think what happens is unfortunately some folks do get it conflated with like developers are now solely responsible for security. I don't think that's the case. As Mark, I'm sure will attest, you're going to have cloud security engineers whose role is to make sure that cloud infrastructure provides the safest deployment capabilities for individuals, not just developers, but a company as a whole. That's part of a project. If I'm a software developer or a development manager and I go to Mark, and Mark's my architect, and I say, Mark, I need to deploy this service application and we need to scale it to X number of people and blah, 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 blah. Mark's going to look at me and say, all right, Ray's going to focus on the threat landscape and the threat modeling from a code perspective. But my responsibility is, how do I make sure that that code is safe? And how do I make sure that the data that me as a developer is sending to Mark and is safe? And how do I take it into those things into consideration and put them in as part of the plan? So it's a shared responsibility. It's a shared responsibility across the whole entire, I'm going to say the whole entire team, not even development team, the whole entire project team.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, just, it's a common misconception today when we talk about DevOps, when we talk about DevSecOps, that a team of developers need to do everything from coding to maintaining the infrastructure to doing security. It's a common misconception, and I got this question a lot from customers. So a lot of customers ask me, wait, if we're doing DevOps, does that mean that everybody needs to know everything right now? No, it's not. It doesn't mean that. It means that you have to be aware of things. You have to be aware of other components that you're running on, and you have to change your mindset from I'm just slowly developing an application, and if the application works, that's fine. That's the end of my responsibility. Towards well, I need to understand where or what my application is running, or what kind of consideration when we're talking. Do I need to think about when we're talking about scaling my application or securing my application? Obviously, developers should not be the last line of defense when we're talking about security and application. There should always be considerations, external considerations, like doing penetration testing or adding like scanning tools to your CI/CD pipelines. But this should be in addition to the work that we do. And I saw situations, where there's too much of a shift left, and then the question comes up and say, hey, we're not delivering on time. It takes too much time to do a very basic development cycle. What should we do? So the answer is you have to be aware, but you don't have to do everything yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point too, with, and especially like you were talking about with DevOps, with so much automation and all of these tools available now. It's not solely on the backs of developers to be like hand coding every single component. And Paul has a good comment here that I want to bring up. They say organizations may have to shift offload and train for addressing security responsibilities to some extent because of the fact that there's so many unfilled security roles nowadays. So that shift left is, do you think that's at least partially, or at least to some degree, because of the difficulty in finding security professionals?
That's a great point. And so, one of my former colleagues at Microsoft, she's a big advocate for finding diverse talent. And the reason is because there is a need for 3 million cybersecurity professionals. And the interesting part is that when we think of a 3 million number, the number 3 million, we think, oh, these are folks who have to be neck deep in, securing code or securing infrastructure, or whatever it might be. And it's not. The way that she looked at it and the way that she helped the organization look at it is that anybody can be a cybersecurity professional. Okay, every role that it comes into the cybersecurity world is critical to the mission of helping to secure different assets. And so it doesn't matter whether you're a developer or an IT admin or somebody in marketing or somebody in sales. All these different roles matter within the cybersecurity world, and they help to solve the need for these missing roles. So Paul, you're spot on. The need for cybersecurity professionals is definitely a big consideration for offloading some of that cybersecurity need, and that's why we have managed solution providers out there that can handle that. That's why we have managed SOCs out there, where companies just offload all that telemetry, that logging off to the SOC, and the SOC helps to handle those things. But ultimately, some of the roles have to be in-house. Some of those things have to be considered in-house because who else is going to do it? It's a hard thing to tackle. I don't want to say that it's an easy. I wish there was a silver bullet that says, "Hey, here's a magic way of getting 3 million cybersecurity professionals for you." But yeah, it's hard, and security is a hard thing. Sometimes security is an underappreciated environment. I would say this, that you look at security professionals and the amount of stress and effort that they have to do in their jobs, and in many cases they don't get the level of appreciation that they should, because they are tasked with defending everything, and they have to be right 100% of the time. There's a saying that says a defender has to be right 100% of the time, an attacker only has to be right one time.
Yeah.
And so those are things to consider.
Yeah. So I think we probably have time. We got about 5 minutes till the top of the hour. I'm going to ask this one last question. Are there any free tools or resources that you can think of off the top of your head that developers can use to gain some of these skills?
Mark, I know that on the AWS side, there are some tools for helping developers from a security lens.
Yeah, so AWS has several services today that can introduce the security aspect into your application, into your infrastructure. Services like Code Guru is a very good place to start, or Security Hub is also a very good place to start, and DevOps Guru also. They're based on AI/ML. And gives you some insights about how your infrastructure is built, how your applications are running, and gives you some basic information on how to mitigate that. And I am a very big fan of Vericode's security labs also. I think it's a very good way to introduce secure coding to an organization. And I think one of my favorites way that I heard people use that is just gamification of it. So making it a game day, making it an event. Put your developers, make a hackathon after see how to secure your application, or how to learn how to secure your application essentially.
And there are some other great tools as well. And thank you for mentioning that, Mark, because obviously I'm trying to be sensitive about not mentioning Security Lab too much. But there are some other great resources. You do have. I'm going to paste them into the chat real quick, if you don't mind, Sharon.
I don't mind at all.
And then here's OWASP. I do recommend OWASP. I think that's like a must-have for software developers to get really in tune with how application security issues evolve and how to kind of tackle them. And Vericode themselves has a knowledge base where you can go to vericode.com/security, and you'll be able to see some of the more common patterns out there. The other thing I did was in the handout section at the very top right of your screen, there's a book. It's called the Vericode Secure Coding Best Practices ebook that I pasted up there. So that way you can download that and you can see some of the common best practices that Vericode also promotes.
Fantastic. And if I can throw one in there, there's an organization called cybrary.org, and it's a free online security-focused MOOCs. Everything is free, and there's all different levels that folks can go and check out the courses on there too. It's very cool. All right. Well, we've got 2 minutes now. So first of all, thank you both so very much for this amazing conversation. This was super, super fun. Thanks so much for allowing me to be part of this. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. We really appreciate having you all here, and you're sending in all your questions. If we did not get to your question, we are going to send them all over to Mark and Ray, and they'll be able to follow up with you afterwards. Just a reminder that this has been recorded, so you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We'll send an email with instructions for accessing it on demand. And with that, I need to announce the winners of our Amazon gift cards today. And those 4 winners today are Patrick L., Victor G., Joseph W., and Kurt L. Congratulations to all our winners. You will also be getting an email from us with instructions for claiming your gift card. Keep an eye on your inbox and make sure and check your spam folders. And if you will just divert your attention real quickly here to your screens, there is a QR code there that you should scan for some very cool stuff from Veracode.
Yep, it's
All
going
right.
to be the Veracode, as mentioned here, the AWS DevOps Secure Coding Challenge that's hosted by AWS and Veracode. And so if you, oh, sorry, let me go back. There we go. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the site where you can register for it and you can compete for some really cool prizes. So just open up your mobile phones, the ones that has software in it. That's all powered by software. And just scan that QR code. It'll take you to the website, register, and you can go ahead and hopefully win some cool prizes.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks to everyone again so much. Really appreciate your time. Hope to see you again at another webinar very soon. I'm Sharon Florentine, signing off.